All right, and we are live. Welcome to Winterviews Series 3, Episode 8, the last Winterview of Season 3. I am your host, Catherine Silva, Cat for short, and tonight we have the incredible Angel Krause here. Angel, how are you?
And incredible. Can I get that in writing?
Yeah,
No,
yeah,
I'm
definitely.
no, I'm doing good. I'm really excited to talk to you again about anything horror related. So I'm really excited to be here. Thanks for asking me.
Yes, I'm really excited to have you on. Typically, it's been the other way around.
Yes.
I've been a guest on Angel's channel, which is Voices from the Mausoleum. It's a really awesome YouTube channel that you should all check out. It includes all kinds of horror content, talking about movies and books and other what have you. I will have a question for you about that later on. Because
Cool.
we always have that one question during the show that is not related to the topic of the evening.
Sure.
Um, but the topic of the evening
Mhm.
is all about modern found footage horror, or what we have been calling modern epistolary horror. Um,
Yes.
and basically, what that is, to my understanding, is when a story is told through a medium that's meant to be portrayed as an audio recording, or a video, or phone messaging, app conversations, or more.
Yeah.
Um, do you have anything to add besides that, or have you found that it includes anything else?
I think the only thing I would add is, when a lot of people think a lot of this is like geared towards like letters. Like when you think of like, you said it completely different than me. Is it epistolary,
Epistolary.
epistolary? Um, and so like when Kat and I were working together on the other Cat Velour, sorry. We were talking about this and she was like, well, you have to change your found footage part to like be transcribed or it's not like epistolary. And she's by definition, she's 100% correct. However, my like modern interpretation of that is like we send video messages instead of letters. So it's
Mm,
really like it could kind of all be under the same thing. That's really the only thing I would add is I've got some stuff
okay,
that I wanted to touch on that is more letter geared, but a lot of it is going to be like
cool.
found footage esque. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Um, and I do actually have questions about what you would consider
Yeah.
modern epistolary versus like the I don't know what to call it, old
The old
epistolary.
school.
But basically, but I'll get to that question later.
Yeah.
To start the discussion tonight, I wanted to ask you, what is it about this genre that drew you to it, and
Yeah.
what interests you about it?
Yeah, so I think the two biggest elements when speaking more on like the found footage side of things is that I've been a massive found footage fan for most of my life. And then I think this to me an overgeneral thought on it is too that I feel like these types of stories can be really personal. They feel like you're getting an insight that you really it's like special treatment into this insight where like if you're third person narrative like normal films it's very like you're an outsider, but when you do something that's first person or you're listening to audios or you're watching people's blogs or you're reading letters or watching whatever, it feels really personal, which to me usually makes the story more believable. It's easier for me
Mhm.
to care about the characters because I feel like I'm a part of the equation. um and I think the other thing it reminds me of is it reminds me of video games. There's a ton. I'm a video gamer. I have been since I was like old enough to hold a controller. And I feel like there's so many games that tell stories through just that.
Mhm.
There's a lot of stories. Like one of my favorite like indie horror games is called Finger Bones. And it is
Yes,
you know that one?
I do.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. It's so good, but it's told through letters and diary entries and things that you find as you're moving along the world. And I love that as opposed to like info dumping that we get in other formats where you're just like they just tell you everything. Or I
Mhm.
like this like piecing things together and getting that personal take on information. So those are things that I really, really enjoy reading, watching, talking about. And so it's one of my favorite things.
Well, it's really neat that you have more of the gamer's eye too
Yeah,
for the epistolary horror or
sure.
found footage epistolary horror genre because not a lot of the guests this season are also gamers.
Oh,
Um,
hmm,
so once we do get to sort of like the your recommendations scene, I'm really excited to see what else you have to share.
yeah.
Um, and I forgot just going to ask it. Did you see John's playthrough of Finger Bones? Is that one that yeah, okay.
100%. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Awesome.
I actually was it his that was the first one I saw of it? The first play? It was either I'm pretty sure it was him. I'm pretty sure it was John's playthrough that I watched cuz I yeah, I'm pretty sure it was his. Had to be. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Um, for those of you who do not know, we are both fans of John Wolfe, who is a uh, video game playthrough. God, my brain just died in the middle of
He's a
that
yeah,
sentence.
he's a
He's
let's
a
player.
Yes, he's a Let's Player, thank you,
Yeah.
on
Yeah.
YouTube,
Yes.
used to be known as Harshly Critical before he
Back in the
just
day.
started to go by his, real name,
Yeah.
um, so I guess then my next question for you is, what was your first taste of found footage or modern epistolary horror?
Yeah, so, on the movie side of it, this is probably a super obvious one, but it's just because of my age. Eventually, this won't be the answer for everybody anymore, but, my introduction to it was the Blair Witch Project, which
Mhm,
was super I was super late in the game to that because I was way too young to watch it probably when it came out. I was like maybe 10. Well, I guess that's not too young. I don't know. It came out in 99. I was born in
yeah,
88. But I didn't watch
me
it
too.
until like a decade after it had been out. And so I was super late to it. And I didn't know how I felt about that format at first because it's, you know, they've gotten a lot better at utilizing techniques that aren't so like all over the place when the camera moving and stuff. But I
Mhm,
found the story like so engaging and I was so invested in the characters and I was worried about them. And I remember thinking like how impressed I was by their ability to do that in a format like this that at that time of my life I had never seen before.
mhm,
Um it was something, that I just was like, "Man, this is something." And then, of course, there wasn't anything again for a little bit, for me
yeah,
until and I watched I think the next one would have been, like, Paranormal Activity would have been the mainstream one.
gotcha.
My first introduction to it overall, first probably would have been video games, though, which would have been Resident Evil. I think,
Mhm,
yeah, I mean, Resident Evil is a survival horror game. A lot of people know that. A lot of people, even non-gamer people, know what it is. But a lot of the stuff that you learn through things as you're picking up pieces of the puzzle when someone is telling the story.
yep,
The notes, the stuff that we fought, like all of that stuff. And so, gaming wise, that was an introduction into that I thought was an interesting thing. First of all, that game terrified me because I was so young when I played it. I would play it all the way to the first hallway zombie, and then I would cut it off and start it over again because that stressed me out. But
yeah,
yeah, it was
there.
my first gaming entry, like as far as what I ever started with anything related to epistolary. It would have been Resident Evil because at that point I wasn't reading stuff like I read now. So
Mhm,
the book stuff would have come literally in the last couple years. Well, no, that's not true. Dracula's epistolary.
mhm.
And so I read Dracula for the first time when I was in middle school. So that would have been probably my first book entry like that. So that's was a movie, a game. That's all of them, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I actually forgot that Resident Evil was probably my intro to it as well.
Yeah.
Did you play the original, the like PlayStation or I assume it's PlayStation. That was the
It was
original.
PlayStation only until, like,
Um,
5, I think. Yeah. Yeah,
okay.
I did. I didn't grow up in a PlayStation household, but when my sister got married, her husband was, like, an avid PlayStationer, like, that's all they use is PlayStation,
Nice.
and so when I was really, really young and I first played it, I couldn't play very much of it because it was super scary, but I would watch them play for hours, like, it was just I was enamored with it, I was just too scared to play.
Mhm. Sure.
Yeah,
No,
but yeah, the OG, the boxy looking ones, yeah,
yeah, no,
yeah.
same. My cousin had it, and I think that I purged it from my mind because I was so scared of it.
Yeah.
And then we revisited it when it was redone for the GameCube.
Oh,
And
yeah, right.
my brother had it, and that
Forgot about
first
that.
scene with the zombie showing up in the hallway totally
It's iconic.
totally freaked me out. And then of
Mhm.
course the itchy tasty, I think, is probably the
Oh,
the
yeah.
the one epistolary heavy moment in the game that
Yes.
most people remember.
Remember. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
but I digress.
Yeah.
So when you're reading a story
Mhm.
about found footage horror, uh, an author has to interpret sound and sight in a different way for the reader so that they can visualize and
Mhm.
auditorily imagine what's happening.
Mhm.
What is your experience with trying to write these scenes for readers?
Oh,
And what do you enjoy about it? What do you
yeah.
dislike about it?
Yeah, I think the writing side of it is really effing difficult. Like I have a collection that came out whenever it came. What was that, last year, I think. And I have a found footage style, it's security camera kind of story that's in it. And I trashed that idea about 30 times before I finally committed to just like I was like, no, I'm just going to do it. I'm just going to figure out a
Mhm,
way to make it work because it's very difficult. Now, I think it's easier. I will say this, and I haven't written anything quite well. That's not true. I guess I have a short that I did like this, but it was one of those things where it's like, okay, if you, when you're writing something like this, hi, Tasha. That's Tasha from the Sinister Scoop.
oh, I didn't know
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
Hello, fellow third statey.
Yeah. Like I think when you do things like when you're doing something as like it's transcribed, that's so much easier because then you don't have to justify why you're explaining the noises. But like when
Yeah.
I wrote a short where it was like a girl in an apartment. It was really basic, very basic setup. It was a girl in an apartment and she is capturing weird stuff on the cameras in her house. And so she lives alone. And trying to just say those things of like telling another human being what they're seeing, but they're not
Mhm.
seeing, they're reading it is actually really difficult. And I don't know
Yeah.
honestly if I like it. I think I just admire when other people can do it really well because it's not I don't think it's super easy, especially when you're approaching it as like you're just trying to describe scenes like from a movie basically is what you're doing because it's footage. Oh yeah, your Facebook's got your legal name. But yeah, it's I think it's an art. I really believe that because the stuff that I have that's like found that's written in in that format for found footage, I'm never ceases to amaze me what people are capable of doing in that regard because it is not an easy task. And
Mhm.
it was like one of the hardest stories to write in the entire collection.
And I have that collection, and I'm very excited because I haven't gotten to that story yet,
Yeah, it
but
gets
I'm
towards
very
the middle
excited to
area.
get to it.
Yeah.
Um, you mentioned before we started the
Mhm.
podcast that you've edited a collection of epistolary horror.
Mhm.
Um, so you've gotten a chance to read a bunch of other people's interpretations. Um, do you want to tell us a little bit more about that collection?
Yeah, so I'm just like the reader. I don't know how to edit anything, but I will tell you, I know that's like what everybody does when they do collections. They say they edited, but I didn't. I was like, hey, let's do this thing. And then Kat Valor was like, cool. And then she did a lot of the hard work, and then we argued about stories, and here we are. Like it's like, so I do have this is a proof that I have of it.
Looks so
Um
pretty.
Thank you. I love it. And the Grim Poppy did the cover, of course.
Nice.
but it's epistolary stories, but it is specifically told, or there's specific stories about zombies. And so, like, one of the things I know that when you do things that are super specific like this, you can run into an issue where like a lot of people don't submit because it's very niche, right?
Hmm.
This was one of the things where I was just like blown away with the way people were able to take this and really run with it, because there's some, I would say, some typical stuff, you know, very zombie normal things, but there's a couple stories in here that are really like just very very unique takes on a zombie. And there's
Cool.
one in particular that was one of the ones that I think Kat was like, this is her like one that she really just had to have. And it was, but it's a very like almost, if you're not really thinking about what you're reading, I don't know that you would think zombie right away, but it is a very unique take on a zombie. But reading the style choices, so people have done like, so my story in it has like transcription, it has letters, it's like a mix of things because I don't know how to stick to
Okay.
just one thing. And you know, you've got basic letter format stuff, text. We've got one story that's like all text messages, which was really cool.
That is cool.
Um, social media post. There's one that even includes things like a not a, I guess a captain's log or a ship log.
Oh, cool.
That also has like the Kat did such a great job formatting this because she added like pictures of the tickets for the ship and like just stuff like that.
Hmm.
But it was just crazy to think about all the different avenues you can take to convey a story as epistolary when it's
Yeah.
there's just like it's not just letters. There's so many other things you can do that are still a written way to tell a story. It's
Yeah.
just I was like blown away with the stuff people came up with.
That's cool. And it's
Yeah.
also cool that you were able to format it in a way that really is unique
Oh,
and
yeah.
propels the stories forward.
Kat is not giving herself enough credit on this because this is a beautiful, like I'm like when I got the proof, there's some minor things that are going to be changed. She would say major, they're minor. But like when I got this and I flipped through it, I was like I was like, this is stunning. Like it's just, oh my God. It just adds to the realism behind it. It's like you're reading, like it feels like you're actually reading this stuff as like a letter or a ship log or whatever. It's done so well. She did a phenomenal job.
Nice. She didn't have those at AuthorCon, did she?
No, no. And she
Okay.
told me she telepathically threatened to kill me if I gave anybody else a
Oh,
copy
man.
before she had a chance to fix it.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. Right.
She was like, "Do not give any more because we sent Tasha an early reader, but that was like it. She wouldn't let me do it anymore. Yay! We are too. We are so pumped. We're in like final editing stuff now, so hopefully we'll
Awesome.
have a date soon. Yeah,
Okay, cool. Yeah,
yeah,
I'm very excited. I would love to get a copy. It
yeah,
sounds like it's right up my alley. And it sounds like it's also very Resident Evil inspired, which makes me even more excited for it.
yeah,
Um,
yeah,
so for those of you watching, you need to be on the lookout for
yeah,
that collection. And
yeah.
what was it called again?
It's called Sincerely Departed.
Okay, cool. Awesome,
Yeah,
awesome, awesome. Um,
yeah.
oh, um, I was just reading the post here.
I wish I'd had
Um,
Kat pick up a hardcover of Undead Folk. Oh,
yeah, I was gonna say I can I can make something special happen for you, Tasha. Don't worry.
and there you go, Tasha.
Yeah. Um, no worries. Um, yeah, I feel like I want more epistolary horror in uh and I think that an anthology of epistolary horror is not something that I have seen. I don't think I've seen much of anything besides found footage I've seen.
Sure.
But maybe not necessarily under the epistolary horror genre.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
that's going to be a really unique, cool book when it comes out.
Yeah, I think I think I just have a feeling it's gonna be pretty well received. And it's There's one other epistolary anthology that came out like literally within the week after I had messaged Kat about wanting to do one, which is just how it goes sometimes.
Sure.
And I'm drawing a blank on the name, but they did one too, but it wasn't the only thing is there wasn't a specific theme, or well, you know what I mean? Like this is like
Yeah.
zombie epistolary. That was just like kind of open to interpretation as long as it was epistolary style. So I think that even though this is niche, I think that zombie stories, when they're written about humans, is usually when they're the best. And I think when you do it in this type of formats, like I was saying before, you get into the human pieces, the connection pieces, the social pieces, the heartbreak, the emo, all of that stuff. And so
Yeah,
I think that comes through really well.
I agree. There is just another
Yep.
post from Tasha here.
Oh, you're
Um,
welcome. Yeah. And man,
um,
some people like I think a lot of people know how to do this really well. And then there's like some people that you read their stuff and you're like, Jesus, like that was phenomenal. Like, you know what? It's just like
yeah.
you're just like, dang, I would have never thought to do it that way, or whatever. And I love things that push like people to be creative. And sometimes when you do things that are quote unquote limited, it really does bring out people's creativity. Like, and it makes people just go in like directions you just would have never even thought of yourself.
Hmm. Yep,
Yeah.
I agree. Um, my my next question. Oh, I don't want to go to that yet because that's apparently I didn't write enough questions for our interview. So because I don't want to get there yet. That's getting too close to.
Yeah.
Um,
Um,
but
on
yeah.
that,
So
I was gonna say on the found footage side, have you read or seen Mr. Howell? Like ow, ow,
Mr.
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 Howell.
Howell.
Mhm.
No. Ooh, what is that?
It's dope. It's so good. Like, okay, so this is a found footage. It's not really a graphic novel, but kind of. So this is transcripted, yeah. But so it's got like blurry pictures that are frozen from the tapes,
Oh, cool.
and then it's got like the transcription of what was said. Um, it's about a 15-year-old kid that he ends up in a wheelchair, and he's like stuck in his room, and so he starts recording on this old camera. He starts seeing very strange things in the windows
Mhm.
across in the other apartment complex. This was so fun, and like one of the most unique takes on like found footage in this format that I've ever seen. Like I just was like, I'm blown away. Like the art alone, the way this is like, I mean, it's crazy. Like the effort that
Yeah,
went
that's
into
beautiful.
this. And this is TW Burgess. I don't want to say that wrong. But
Okay.
it was just like I did what's that thing called where you pay ahead of time? Kickstarter. I did a
Oh yeah,
Kickstarter for
Kickstarter, yeah.
it. And it was just one of those things where you're just like, that seems like a really cool that seems like a really cool concept, but then you get it and you're like, no, like this is legit. Like it was so good. And because I did the Kickstarter, I also got like a print
Oh, nice.
too. And but yeah, it was like I just wouldn't have thought to tell a full story like that. And then to
Mhm.
like take the extra step and like include the pictures. I love that.
It's so
Like
cool.
it's such a cool concept. Like one of my favorite found footage movies is Savage Land. And literally like on the ghost monster whatever side of things, there's not a lot. The entire story, like the spooky stuff, is told through just Polaroids. And
Huh.
I was like shocked at how effective that was because you're so limited to what you can see. And it kind of was like a great way to do like a low budget film because then you don't have to worry about everything being super clear or making something look really, really good if you don't have the budget for it. It's very blurry pictures, but it works as a storytelling.
Yeah.
It's done like a mockumentary. Um,
Okay. All right.
but the picture portion though, I was just like my head just exploded. It was so good. And so I've really liked finding stuff like that too, because it's a very unique way to tell that kind of story. I don't see that very often.
I was gonna say I haven't heard of either of those things. I hadn't
Mhm.
heard of Mr. Howell or Savage Land. Um,
Yeah.
And I always love being introduced to new stuff, so I'm gonna have to look for those. I'm
Yeah,
definitely gonna have to look for those. Um,
they're worth it.
have you read, or I mean, you know of it, I'm sure, but House of Leaves, which I think is
I
probably
will
the
never read House of Leaves. People, BookTube and readers have scared me so bad. I don't even want to say it 3 times in a row, but I'm familiar with it. Yes, I'm familiar with it.
okay.
Yeah.
That's kind of like that's the big epistolary horror
Okay, I didn't know it
book
was
that
that
I
big.
think of. I would say that it does utilize some modern some found footage stuff
Okay.
because it does talk about um I guess it talks about a family that documents this house with their video camera.
Okay.
Um and there's definitely diary entries, and then there's also a lot of like footnotes,
Yep.
and different characters have different colored fonts, and there's a
Man.
lot of like strangely formatted things in there, like scraps, because it's supposed to
Sounds
be
cool.
this like graphomanic person that is just writing notes all over everything.
Right.
Um,
I gotcha.
uh, so it's just it's a lot to sort of take in at
That's
first,
that's what I've
but
heard.
but I also think that it's just like so it's almost like falling into a well a little bit.
Yeah.
Um, where it just kind of like it's a story within a story within a story. And I really like that idea
Yeah.
as well.
Yeah. That sounds like something I would love, but I am so intimidated by the concept of that book. Like just because of stuff like other people have said. I'm just like,
Sure.
that sounds terrifying. I don't know if I could handle all of that. That sounds like a lot, but it does sound very cool.
It's a thick old book for
Yeah,
sure.
it
Um,
says the damn
there's
thing.
uh the only other two
Mhm,
that I personally know
mhm.
that have come out fairly recently. I think it was God, I don't know if it's Dark Matter. I feel like it might be Dark Matter had an anthology about haunted reels or something like that.
That sounds cool.
Which which is supposed to be quite amazing, and I have it and it's in the other room, and I really should have pulled it out for this, and I was scrambling around like a chicken with my head cut off
It's
before
okay.
we
It's been a
started
long week,
recording.
man. I get it.
Um
You'll have to send me the name of it so I can look it up because
yeah,
that sounds cool.
yeah.
Haunted Reels. Mhm.
And then oh god, the other one is episode 13, I think is the name of it.
I don't know that one.
Uh and it's about a crew of ghost hunters. I'm pretty sure they're ghost hunters that
I
go
love it
into a
already.
hotel,
Yeah,
and their documentation there.
that sounds
So
cool.
those were the only other ones that I felt like I should mention. I have not read either one because I
Yeah,
am so far behind on my TBR.
yeah.
But I will bring up the question: what are and you've talked about a couple, but what are some of your favorite examples of found footage, apostolary in books, television, film, and other mediums? And this could go on for a while.
Yeah, yeah. So, I think the shortest list is probably gonna be books. Um, just because I'm an insanely slow reader and I just got back into reading like 2 years ago. Um, so I showed Mr. Howell already, but there is I'm really mad that I can't find my signed copy of Revenge Arc. It's like one of my most prized possession, but I can't find it. I think it's because I just did a video on it, so it's like somewhere over there in chaos.
Yep.
But um Mon Amour is a Cat Velour book that just came out. It was a surprise release in February, and it is told entirely through text messages.
Oh, yeah, that is cool.
It's so cool, and it's a very quick, I think I read it in like 20 minutes, and that's saying something because I I am super slow at reading. But it's a cool little like horror mystery, spooky kind of story. But I really like the use of things like that. Her other book, Revenge Arc, which came out last year. And I'm so mad that I don't have it to show because the formatting on that is just like chef's kiss too, because it's got like Reddit forums, emails, social media posts, blogs, interviews, transcribed. Like it is like it runs the gambit on all of the things. And it's
Nice.
all done in a way that's like it's scattered information, but it tells a very cohesive story. And I it's one of the things that I'm appreciating about newer found footage movies as well is taking a modern technology like text
Mhm.
messaging, like Reddit, and using those things to tell stories. It's like kitty cat friend.
That was, yeah,
Mine was
haunted.
all over the place a minute ago. Oh, he's over here asleep now. But yeah, like it's become one of my favorite things. Like I love that we've gotten like don't get me wrong, there's always a warm place in my heart for like letter stories or like hand cams in found footage movies. But when they can take those stories and tell them in a similar concept in a newer technology, I really
Mhm,
just I love stuff like that. Like I love one of my favorite subgenres of found footage is like content creator found footage because it's like
mhm.
it's taking the world of YouTube or the world of podcasting and making it a horror movie, and there's just something so realistic and fun about that.
Yeah.
Um, and then even the, what was it called? There's a found footage movie called Live Scream, and it's
Okay.
about a guy who goes into it's so good. The sequel is due to come out hopefully very, 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 very soon. But it's about a guy who's a Let's Player and he's
Okay.
live streaming his game when somebody hacks in and bad things start to happen to his friends.
Okay.
But the games that they created for him to play are just like super nostalgic. They scream like Amnesia, like all of those old like dungeon crawlery type horror games that came out like forever ago.
Mhm.
Um and it just was very, very cool as a gamer to watch that and feel all of those things again. Cause I was like, I've played games like all of those games. This is really cool.
Yeah.
And but to make it a horror movie, I thought it's I don't know, it just seems so genius to me. Um, and then yeah, I mean, video games have been utilizing letter methods for a long time. There are some games that are really just movies. Like
Mhm.
where you don't do anything, you just walk around. Like,
Sure.
there's one called, is it The Death of Edith Finch, The Funeral?
Yeah.
You know what I'm talking about?
Um,
John played that
I
one too.
do.
Yeah.
Oh, it's the yeah.
It's not really horror. It's really, there's a horror piece in it because there's like
It
the
does have,
two,
yeah, it does have a horror piece in it.
and you do feel uncomfortable at times because of the way some of the characters die and stuff, but but it relies on a type of storytelling similar to like epistolary storytelling, and it's just a
Yep.
really unique way to learn a story. The same with what was the other game I was going to mention? It's called, is it just called Home?
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, it's like I think the daughter comes home from college or something and
Is it
like nobody's
Homecoming?
there.
I think it's home is it Homecoming?
Oh, maybe. Something, yeah, something like that. I know it's got
I
home
know
in the
exactly
name.
which one you mean, though.
Yeah, she comes in and she has to figure out how to get in the house. And then she gets in the house and she's like reading diary things and note things. And I think she learns that, like, I think it's when she finds out, like, maybe her sister is a lesbian or I don't know. It's like got all these like family secrets and stuff that come out,
Yeah.
but it's all through notes and stuff that you find when you're playing the game. And I think even though that's not really a horror game either, I just think that technique is used a lot and it works, I think, really well in a video game setting because it's like, you've got to piece together the story. Or Silent Hill is a horror example. I was trying to get back on the horror train.
Yeah.
Silent Hill is another example, where you learn mostly through finding stuff. um there's a I forget what they're called. when you're it's not tabletop, but it's like it's those games where if you're playing multiplayer, you can only go as far as the other person, and then you're like you
So
can't go any further. But there's a game series, it's two games, I think it's only two, called Hunter. So the first one's called Hunter the Reckoning, and the second's called Hunter Redeemer. Huge fan of those. But like
mhm,
those are told in similar fashion too. They have notes. There's one part in the second one where like you have to learn about this company and what they're pumping into the water through like reading terminals and that
mm,
kind of stuff.
yep.
And so I think all of that stuff just works so well. I really like all of it. I think the only thing that requires extra pizzazz in 2024 is letters. I think if you do just letters as a bigger story, I don't mean as a short, but like in
Yeah.
games or movies or like a full-fledged book, I think there has to be some extra oomph to it. But
Mhm.
otherwise, like if it's got social media stuff or content creating stuff or text message, I'm here for all of that. I love the changeover to the more modern ways of communicating and then using that to tell a story.
Yeah. A lot of stuff, a lot of games from Chilla's art also utilize that text message
Yep.
horror.
Yes.
Um
Yeah.
and I'm seeing it a lot more in indie games though. I feel like
Yes.
it's happening a lot more in indie games now than it is
Mhm.
in your bigger
Yeah.
AAA
It's
horror
cheaper.
games.
Mhm.
But it's
Yeah.
really neat that there's so much of it and that it
Yeah.
seems to be prolific.
Yeah.
Um,
No, for sure.
the other one that
Um,
I thought of was and this is AAA, was Alien Isolation.
oh my God. That game was so scary. Yeah. That's
Because
true.
you're reading all these terminals, you're finding
You're
out
right.
all this stuff about Weyland-Yutani. Um, it just
You're right.
it's and then in space, of course, so you've got that sci-fi horror
So
aspect.
good. Yeah. Yeah, and honestly, like, I mean, on the subject of games, I know like nobody will let me talk about this as horror, but I'm like, I don't care anymore. I'm just gonna do it anyway. Like Fallout is similar. Like you learn a lot of
Yeah.
stuff in Fallout from reading stuff and going to terminals or finding stuff as you're going through the game. And I would just like to say, okay, first of all, this is my defense of it being horror related. It's got zombies, okay, and giant ants and mutated
Mhm.
animals. And if that's not horrific, I don't know what is. So
Hey,
that's my thoughts on that.
I love horror adjacent things.
Yes.
So, and Fallout is huge right now, so I
Yeah.
think we should definitely talk about it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I started with 3, and one of my favorite things to do was to find the other vaults and then go through them and learn what happened or what was like that was like one of my favorite things. And it's another example of like you have to go through stuff to find to figure out what the hell's going on. And I just really like stuff like that. It's almost like horror mystery kind of, because like some of that
Yeah,
stuff you really do have to like piece it together, really think about it. And I really like that because I like when films do that too. So I like it
sure.
in games, and I like if I'm reading something to have to be like, okay, well, let me see if I can figure this out. Like to have the pieces in front of you, but you're just getting them little at a time.
Yeah,
I love stuff like that.
yeah. Um, I think one of the things that I've only delved into it a little bit, but so far what I have seen I really enjoy, and I'd love to listen to it in its truest form, which I think was it originated. Both of these things originated as podcasts.
Mhm.
How I don't know how much you've listened to Epistolary podcast stuff, but both of these things have been adapted now into TV series, and I would definitely call them both horror.
Archive,
Um,
is that one of them?
Archive 81 is definitely one of them.
Yes.
The other
I
one
didn't
is
know that
Lime
was a podcast. I just added
Okay.
it to a list of things to listen to because Tasha and I talk about it all the time because we watched the season kind of sort of together. Like we watched it and talked about it on an episode for the show. And we were both like there. Do you know it was gonna come up? Is that what you're saying? It's but like it's a very sore subject. Like Yes, she's
Yeah.
still super mad about it. But I had posted something and tagged her in it on Twitter, and somebody was like, "Oh, you should check out the podcast." And I was like, "What?" I didn't know it was a podcast. So it is on my list. But anyway, that's that one I'm excited to check out because I really loved the show.
Mhm.
So I'm very curious to see the source material. But what was the other one you were going to mention?
The other one is Limetown, which
Oh, nice.
was I think that one actually happened maybe if it didn't happen at the same time as Archive 81, it was just a little bit before.
Okay.
Um, and it only had one season also, unfortunately. Uh, that is I rage about that as well. I just want to
Mhm.
say I am still really upset that both of those only had one season, but Limetown is about a town in the I think it's in the Midwest or
Mm.
it's somewhere like East Coast that had a whole it was kind of isolated. There was a scientific community there, and then everybody in town vanished. And there was I guess there was like somebody called the cops. There was some kind of a disturbance that happened, and by the time the cops got there, they were blocked off by the military. And then 3 days passed, and by the time they got inside, everybody in town was gone. And the podcast host is the niece of one of the town residents. So she's trying to figure out what happened and
That's
has this
really cool.
drive. And it was an awesome show. Like I was on board so hard.
Yeah.
And and there is a podcast that at least has 2 or 3 seasons maybe,
Mhm.
um, that's worth looking into, but I really am enjoying so far the and I guess I don't know if I would I guess they originated as podcasts. Archive 81 doesn't include a podcast as its epistolary,
I
um,
understand. Okay. Yeah.
storytelling,
Right.
but, uh but I like the idea of the podcast
Yeah, I do
epistolary.
too. That's a cool yeah. Like, what there is a, I think it's a one of the Halloween anthologies. It's like, what is it called? Bad Candy? You ever seen that?
No.
It's so, like most anthologies like they have like that like overlapping story kind of like VHS
Mhm.
has it where they have like this big story that they show multiple times and then they have like the in between.
Okay.
So in this one it's podcasters that are telling
Okay.
the stories and yeah, I genuinely I love stuff like that. Like I think it's such an effective way to tell a story because
Mhm.
it's like I said, it just feels so realistic. I mean, like, give me a YouTuber doing something stupid for subs, and I'm like, "Yep, I'm in."
Yeah.
Like, because I'm like, I not that I would do those things, but I get it. Like, people will do crazy things for views and stuff, or to keep their like the
Yeah.
whole thing with Deadstream was he lost his sponsorship because he said something stupid on the internet, and so he's trying to
Gotcha.
like get it back, and that's like the premise of the movie is that's what he's doing. And I'm like, I'm here for stories like that. Like I think the use of that technology, like there's one film, I forget the guy's name. He's done like 50 million found footage movies. They're all about an hour a piece.
Okay.
But this one was called Visitor, Visitor, but it's told entirely through a Ring doorbell.
Huh. Okay.
And not flawlessly executed, but conceptually, that's pretty good. Like that's
Yeah.
pretty cool. I like uh one of the first short stories I ever submitted anywhere was a Ring doorbell story. And so when I
Okay.
saw there was like a movie about it, I was like, makes sense. They're scary. And
Mhm.
it was just a really cool perspective because you're only getting the glimpses of it. And that kind of creates the atmosphere and Visitor, thank you. I couldn't remember what it was called, Tasha. Do you remember off the top of your head the name of the guy that makes those films? He's done like so many of them. He did Mr. Creep, he did Visitor, he did Last Broadcast. No, not Last Broadcast. Something
Hmm.
like that. The last I don't know. But he's and I think that one was told entirely through like mostly a police body cam. So he's like
Okay.
very like I really hope he continues to grow and do more things because he's very, 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 very. That's fair enough. Thank you for your help.
Yeah.
um, it's but he takes those concepts and really puts them in unique situations like the doorbell or the body cam or I just yeah, I love stuff like that. I think it's really cute. Really
Cool.
cute, really well done. And I know like getting back to like book stuff, this one is like not like 100% found footage, but it has some found footage components. And that was the Odious Ghouls book that Tom Reimer just released not that long ago.
I have that one.
Yeah.
I
I
have
got to
yet to
blurb the
read it.
front. It was the
Oh,
very first
cool.
blurb I've ever done, and it's so meaningful to me. I haven't even gotten a new print since they fixed the coloration on the bottom. I was like, "Nope, this is the one." Um, but this is told through like cameras. Like they have like, and so there's parts of it where they're talking about the setup on the cameras and what the cameras can see and those kind of things. It's like anything that is even like brushes those things I'm interested
Mhm.
in because it's just such a people say like, "Oh, it's not realistic." I'm like, "No, it is though." You see on all the time
Sure.
people getting attacked and people just standing there and recording it with their phone. So
Yep.
don't tell me that this isn't realistic
Yeah.
because it is. People will stand around and record anything, no matter
Yep.
if their life is at risk, someone else's life is at risk. It's way more plausible than I think people give the subgenre credit for.
And there's plenty of videos, real videos of
Yes.
people out there doing that very thing. So
Yeah.
it's yeah, it's not
Yeah.
hard to imagine. I guess I didn't realize that that was about that, even though the cover is very clear. um
Yeah. It's not told a lot through that angle. It's just very like, it just has those notes in it for me, and I
okay.
associate Tom with found footage because he was my first co-host for Found Footage Fridays on the channel, and we
Oh,
did that
gotcha.
for over a year, and so I
Okay.
always associate him with found footage anyway, and so you can to me, knowing that about him, like, because we talk about found footage so much, I went into this and I immediately was like picking up on the found footage references and things, or the
Mhm.
inspirations rather, and that kind of stuff. So
Okay. So for those of you who do not know, this is Tom Reimer,
yeah,
and he has some pretty amazing books. You should
he's
definitely
great.
check them out. We've also mentioned Kat Valor on the program. She is awesome as well. You should check her out.
Mhm.
Um, and then I also there was this comment, the Gracefield incident. And I'm not familiar with this, although it sounds kind of familiar.
It's alien found footage.
Okay.
And the reason, and this isn't a spoiler because this is literally like the first 3 seconds of the movie. An expecting couple have a really bad car accident, and the guy's
Okay.
eye gets replaced with a fake eye.
Oh, okay.
And so they use the eye as the filming device for a majority of the film.
Huh.
So there's hand
Okay.
cams as well with friends that they go on this trip with, but the hand cams are limited, and most of what you see is through the camera he put in his eye.
Gotcha. God.
It's a cool one. I love aliens. I really wish there was more good alien found footage, and it's one
Mhm.
that like I think some people don't really care for it because a lot of people when they think of found footage they think really sad endings because the footage is found because the people died, right? Like that's the
Yeah.
usual assumption. And this one, I won't say what happens because I think it's a huge twist, but it has a happier ending, and I think it kind of turned people off from it. But that's one of
Okay.
my favorite ones. I loved it. I was really moved by some of the themes in it, and it was pretty scary at points. I really, really liked it. But I like the eye thing was really cool because then it's like, well, he's not going to drop his eye like you would a camera.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So it was
Yeah.
cool. Very
Hmm.
good shout, Tasha. That was good. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, the other thing that I just thought of,
Mhm.
which is I don't know if I would necessarily call it. It's kind of found footage, but it's got a
Mhm.
very sci-fi lean to it.
Mhm.
And it is a podcast, and I've
Okay.
listened to probably 2 seasons of it now, but there's at least three. And
Okay.
it's called The Darkest Night or just Darkest Night.
Okay.
Um, there is an overarching story to it where you've got these two I'm going to call them scientists, they're doctors, something like that, working in a
Sure.
lab, and they get a
Yeah.
body every episode that they are then like downloading the memories of,
That's
their
cool.
last memories of, and then that memory ends up being a story, like a short horror story.
I like that.
And I think there's a different guest narrator every episode, and some of the names are
Very
pretty
cool.
big. There's, I think Keith David shows up. There's randomly Jay from Jay and Silent Bob. Um, just a lot of guest actors, and then a lot of like
That's cool.
varying types of horror in the short stories, but
That's
with this
cool.
whole overarching idea
Yeah.
that
I love
there's
stuff like
there's
that.
found footage happening, um and it's really cool, it's really unique. I haven't heard anybody else talk about it,
Yeah,
uh
I've never heard of that one.
and I haven't listened to it in a while. I really got into it a couple years ago, but
Mhm.
I do recommend it.
I'll have to get, like, a list of these things from you so I can check them out. Archive 81 was on my list, because it was just mentioned. Because I didn't know it was a podcast, but the other one, the Lime one and this
Yeah,
one, I'd love to
Limetown.
if you
Yeah,
text them to me, I'll check them out or
cool.
message them to me.
Yep.
'Cause yeah, I really yeah, I that sounds really, really cool. I've been not that this isn't epistolary, but the only I have a I have an attention issue with podcasts. If they don't get me right away, I just, I'm
Sure.
but, I've been listening to Black Velvet Fairies,
Hmm,
and it's produced by Jamie Nash, who has worked with, like, Ed Sa Eduardo Sanchez, and he did work on, like, some found footage movies, and I had him,
okay.
like, I get nervous every time I record with someone else anyway, always. I even now, I get really nervous. And so I'm actually an introvert. And so it's like stressful. So Last Night in Terrace Lanes just came out like a couple months ago. And my co-host Steve was like, "Oh, let's get an interview with like the filmmaker." And I was like, "Yeah, sure. Sure. Of course, whatever. Well, I'm happy to be a part of that. Whatever.
Mhm,
Filmmaker interviews are fun." And he's like, "Okay, his name is Jamie Nash." And I was like, "Okay, no idea." I didn't ring any bells at the time. And
mhm.
so I go to look him up and I was like, "Steve, I am not prepared to talk to Jamie Nash." And he was like, "What do you mean?" I was like, "He did one of my favorite found footage movies that's about Bigfoot called Exist. He's worked on countless other projects. He's a horror author." Like, I was like, "I'm not ready for that conversation." Like, I thought I was going to throw up. Like, I was
Oh,
so
man.
scared. And he was like the coolest person, like so
Nice.
chill. We were supposed to be talking about Last Night at Terrace Lanes, but I'm sure as you've interacted with me enough, you should know that's not what we stayed talking about. We talked about found footage. We talked about Exist a lot.
I mean, you had to though, is the
I know
thing.
there was no way. I told Steve, I was like, "I'm going to do my best. I'm going to stay on topic, but I'm not, just so you know." I had to, but he was so great. Like, he was just good to talk about what he didn't care. He was so like what I was so great. But anyway, he's producing this podcast. It's only on like I think episode 3 just came out last week, so episode 4 should be this week. But it's
Okay.
about this woman who finds these paintings in her grandmother's attic, and they're all Fae themed. She even went as far as to make the pictures, so like they're on the website. You can see what the paintings are supposed to look like.
Okay.
But it's a story about how she takes them, and then she starts having all these guests come on to talk about like different things like Fae, hauntings, EVPs, like they talk about all this stuff. But it's like it's such a cool idea for a podcast. And then I'm learning because I'm super podcast ignorant. People are like, "No, like all kinds of podcasts like that exist." And I'm like, "What?" Like I feel like I've been missing out this whole time because I didn't know things like that existed. These fictional stories told on
Mhm.
podcasts, which
Yeah.
is I just so good. But anyway, but I've been like really into that one, and it's really, really good. But it's done by a couple of people that were involved in Blair Witch. But Jamie
It's
Nash is producing it, and it's been so good so far.
it's so cool.
Yeah.
I like, as far as podcasts go, I can listen to interview podcasts and frequently do, but I
Yeah.
love horror story podcasts.
I
They are
gotta do that. I
definitely
gotta
my
listen
jam.
more.
Um, and
Yeah.
Spotify has a really good collection of them.
Yeah.
So, um,
Yeah.
so I'm gonna pivot our questioning here
Okay.
because we are running out of time. And
Mhm.
I need to get to my aside question, which is the question that does not relate
Okay.
to our topic. And the side question, which I've probably asked you this before, but I do not remember what the answer is. When your YouTube name is Voices from the Mausoleum,
Mhm.
where did that come from?
I love talking about this. This is a question I will never get tired of. Okay, so in my real life, because this is fake life, in my real life, it's all simulation. In my real life, I don't have a lot of horror lovers to talk to. People in my day-to-day life. My partner watches horror, but at the time that I started Voices, I was married, and that person was not very interested in horror. But like my best friends will suffer through it for me, but they're not super into it either. And so basically, I had already been doing YouTube for a different thing for I think like at that point maybe like 2 years, and I was like, man, I really want to do something like that. Like even if it's just me talking to myself, I'll feel better because at least I can talk about things I want to talk about. And so I started thinking about when it came to thinking about a name. And the
Mhm.
first thing I wanted, let's see if I can remember what it was. The first thing I wanted to do was goremonger, right? Because that's funny. Do you know how many things exist with that name? A lot. So I was like, okay, that's a no. And also it really wasn't very representative of what I wanted to do. I just thought it sounded fun.
Yeah,
But I started so like I grew up watching Tales from the Crypt
yeah.
and stuff like that, right? And so I was like, it would be, I want something like that, where like I'm telling, because even though I'm not telling stories, I wanted it to be like that type of host situation where it's like sharing these things with other people. And so this is literally where the name came from. All I can picture in my head while I'm trying to come up with a name is a girl, me, sitting in a mausoleum with all these books and movies and documents and papers everywhere. And she's frantically just yelling out her love for horror in a microphone, trying to send out the signal to find other people
Mhm.
that feel the same way. And so I was just like, and it literally was like Voices from the Mausoleum.
I
And
like it though.
it's nuts. It's like so random, but I wanted something that was like an homage to the storytelling that I loved and the anthology stuff that I loved growing up, which was Tales from the Crypt. But obviously, I didn't want it to be so overly obvious that was the connection
Yeah.
too. But I just, it became this thing of like, I just wanted people to talk to about horror. And I didn't have it in my day to day life. And I really wanted it. And it felt a lot like screaming it out into the void, hoping that someone would answer back. And, 3 years later, people are yelling back. So it's nice.
Yeah. There was a need. There
Yeah.
was definitely a need.
Yeah. So it's so funny because Tasha still does this too. And it doesn't matter because I love her anyway. But there's like so many people say voices of. And so when I
Mm,
came up with it, I actually went back and forth of whether I wanted to use of or from. And I settled for from because it's like coming from inside the house,
yeah.
inside the mausoleum. And so I was like, okay, but it's just funny because like I get it's of all the time, but it's just that was one of the it's funny that people say that because it's one of the things that I did consider, but I didn't end up following through with. But yeah, it literally was just I could just picture myself trying to reach out to people that were horror fans, and that was what I pictured in my head. So that's the name. I'm getting better, I think, Hope. Dude, you just did my influential horror and you said Voices of the Mausoleum. And it was so hard for me to not be like, are you for real right now? You're the host. You can't say the name wrong.
Oh, that's amazing.
But yeah, it's yeah, so that's where it came from. I wanted it to be a representative of what I'm trying to do with the channel and what my mission is.
Mhm.
Um yes. When I
That's
was editing it,
amazing.
I was like, this woman, I'm just I accept you for who you are, Tosh. But yeah, I just and then it was I did search first to make sure that wasn't taken.
Good. Yeah.
or that there was nothing, too closely related, and there really wasn't at all. And so yeah, that's kind of where that came from.
Awesome. Well, it
Yeah.
was a fantastic story. I was hoping it would be.
Yeah.
Um, and it definitely works.
Yeah.
Uh, I don't think that I said it incorrectly
You did not.
this interview because
Nope.
I can picture the acronym
Yeah.
in my head
Yeah.
when I'm thinking of it. So
Yeah.
uh, maybe that's the trick, Tasha. Just picture
My
picture the
bad.
acronym.
Yeah. VF, not VO.
Um,
Yeah.
so that brings us to the end of our last episode of Winterviews for Series 3. I would love to thank you, Angel, for coming on and talking all about found footage. It was
Yeah.
a lot of fun.
It was. Thank you
Um,
for having me. Yeah.
yeah, of course. If you people watching love found footage, love epistolary, love zombies, you should keep an eye out on all of Angel's socials for that anthology when it comes out. Can you quickly just
Thanks, Todd.
tell people where they can
Yeah.
find you?
Yeah, everything, everywhere. So some of my names were taken on social media, so they're all different. But if you search Voices from the Mausoleum, even in Google now, stuff will come up. You'll find me. Voices from the Mausoleum, Voices FTM, anything like that. You'll find me.
Yes, just not of the
Not of Tosh.
mausoleum.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
No, I'm on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, obviously YouTube. What's the other one? Oh, TikTok, but I
Blue
don't really post
Sky.
there. I'm not good at
You're on Blue
TikTok.
Sky
So
too.
yeah.
I will be putting these links in the video. So if you are finding this video on YouTube for the first time, you can scroll down and check the little blurb of information down there. You'll be able to find everything to follow. So this is it for series 3. It's been a really wonderful collection of people that we've had on this season. We will be back next January or February for season 4. And if you have not had a chance to, you should go through and watch
Yeah.
all of this series, all of series 1 and 2. I will say that in light of recent events, I have deleted Zach Rosenberg's episode from series 2. That is no longer on my YouTube channel, but everybody else's episodes you can find. And I encourage you to do so and check out those authors because they have amazing things to say about all the genres they love. So, without further ado, thank you all for coming, and I hope that you have a great evening.